If you can control your emotional reactions, nothing in the modern world can control you. If you are easily offended, easily triggered, or easily shaken, this audiobook will make you uncomfortable. Because the modern world does not reward emotional people. It exploits them. Every reaction you give away is power you lose. Every time something controls your mood, it controls your behavior. And whatever controls your behavior controls your life. This audiobook will teach you one thing: how to become hard to disturb, not cold, not emotionless, but calm, disciplined, and internally unmovable. In a world designed to provoke you, listen carefully, because emotional control is no longer optional. Chapter 1. Your emotions are being used against you. You need to understand something immediately. This is not personal. This is structural. The modern world is not chaotic by accident. It is engineered to provoke you, engineered to distract you, engineered to pull emotional reactions out of you constantly. Because emotional people are easier to control. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. If someone can control how you feel, they can control what you do. Say that again. If someone can control how you feel, they can control what you do. And right now, too many people are living emotionally exposed lives. You open your phone, and within seconds, your nervous system is hijacked. Anger, fear, comparison, outrage, validation seeking. You didn't choose those emotions. They were selected for you. You have a choice, but only if you can see the game. The modern world rewards reaction, not restraint. Social media amplifies outrage because outrage spreads faster than calm. News headlines are designed to provoke fear, not clarity. Workplaces reward urgency, not composure. Relationships reward emotional displays, not emotional stability. Everywhere you go, there is pressure to react, and every reaction you give away is leverage you lose. Most people believe their emotions are private. They're not. They're predictable. If you react the same way every time you're criticized, ignored, challenged, or disrespected, you become easy to manage. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to think. But most people never pause. They react instantly. Instant reaction feels honest. It feels real. It feels human. But it is also lazy. Because reacting requires no discipline. Responding does. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about controlling it. It's not about being cold. It's about being deliberate. And the people who understand this quietly rise while others stay reactive and exhausted. Look closely at how power operates. The calm person in the room always has more control than the emotional one. The one who listens more than they speak. The one who doesn't rush to defend themselves. The one who doesn't emotionally leak every thought. They're not weak. They're regulated. And regulation is power. You have been conditioned to believe that expressing everything is healthy. That letting emotions out immediately is maturity. That holding back is repression. That's only half the truth. Unfiltered expression is not strength. It's exposure. Every time you overreact, you reveal your triggers. Every time you explode, you show your pressure points. Every time you rush to explain yourself, you hand away authority. You have a choice. You can continue to live emotionally open, where the world presses a button and you respond automatically. Or you can begin to build emotional discipline, where nothing outside you has direct access to your behavior. That's the key. Emotional discipline does not mean you don't feel. It means you don't let feelings decide your actions. Most people confuse feeling with obligation. I feel angry, so I must respond. I feel hurt, so I must explain. I feel disrespected, so I must react. No, you feel something. That does not mean you must do anything. You have a choice. The people who control environments understand this deeply. They don't need to overpower you physically. They don't need to dominate you intellectually. They just need to provoke you emotionally. Once you react, you've lost neutrality. Once you lose neutrality, you lose leverage. That's why emotional control is not a self-help concept. It's a survival skill. The modern world runs on speed. Fast news, fast opinions, fast outrage, fast judgments. Slowness is now resistance. When you slow your reactions, you interrupt the system. When you pause, you regain control. That pause, even a few seconds, is where power lives. It's not about anger. It's about discipline. It's not about fear. It's about awareness. It's not about insecurity. It's about self-command. You don't need their permission to be unbothered. You don't need their permission to stay silent. You don't need their permission to think before you speak. But the world will try to rush you anyway. It will reward your reaction with attention, likes, responses, engagement, and in exchange it takes your calm. That's the trade most people make without realizing it. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to respond to every message. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You need to protect your internal state. Because once your internal state is stable, your decisions become cleaner, your words become sharper, your presence becomes heavier. And people feel that. That's the key. Emotional control is not about controlling others. It's about making yourself unmanageable by chaos. The less reactive you are, the harder you are to manipulate, the harder you are to disturb. So here is the discipline you begin with. Before reacting, pause. Before responding, breathe. Before expressing, ask one question. Is this reaction giving me power or taking it away? If it takes power away, don't give it. You have a choice. Master this, and you'll start noticing something immediately. The world feels quieter. People lose their grip on you. Triggers lose their force. And that's when you realize the truth. The modern world is loud because most people are emotionally uncontrolled. Your advantage is becoming the opposite. You've seen how emotions are used against you. Now it's time to talk about what most people lose first when they stay reactive. Respect. Chapter 2. Reacting is the fastest way to lose power. Power is quiet. Reaction is loud. And that difference matters more than most people realize. The moment you react emotionally, something shifts. You may not feel it immediately, but everyone else does. Your position weakens. That's the key. Reactive people believe they are standing up for themselves. In reality, they are revealing themselves. Every emotional reaction sends information. What bothers you? What threatens you? What you care about too much? And once that information is visible, it can be used. You have a choice. You can respond from discipline, or you can react from impulse. Most people live in impulse. They feel something and they act immediately. They don't pause. They don't evaluate. They don't choose. They explode. They defend. They justify. They over-explain. And every time they do, they lose leverage. It's not about anger. It's about control. It's not about confidence. It's about restraint. Look at how authority actually works in the real world. The person who reacts first is rarely the one in charge. The person who speaks the loudest is rarely the one with power. The person who explains themselves emotionally is rarely the one respected. Calm creates gravity. Reaction creates noise. That's the difference. You don't need their permission to stay composed. You don't need their permission to say nothing. You don't need their permission to let a moment pass. But emotional people feel compelled to act. They believe silence means weakness. They believe restraint means submission. They believe not reacting means losing. That belief keeps them stuck. You have a choice. Every argument you rush into, every message you reply to immediately, every insult you feel the need to address, pulls you downward, not because you're wrong, but because reaction puts you on the same level as the trigger. That's the key. Power never meets chaos at the same altitude. It stays above it. When you react, you descend. When you pause, you rise. Most people don't understand this because reaction feels satisfying in the moment. It feels like release. It feels like control. But it's false control. True control is delayed, measured, intentional. It's not about winning the moment. It's about owning the situation. Reactive people chase immediate relief. Disciplined people build long-term authority. And authority is cumulative. Every time you remain calm under pressure, people begin to adjust around you. They speak differently. They approach differently. They hesitate before provoking you again, not because you demanded respect, but because you embodied it. That's the key. Respect is not requested. It is inferred. And nothing signals respect faster than emotional self-control. You don't need to dominate conversations. You don't need to correct everyone. You don't need to respond to every challenge. You need to be unmovable. When you react emotionally, you let others dictate the pace. Fast reactions mean fast mistakes. Fast words mean weak positioning. Fast emotions mean slow thinking. You have a choice. You can let someone else's behavior pull you out of alignment, or you can let their behavior reveal who they are while you remain steady. It's not about being passive. It's about being selective. Strong people choose their battles. Weak people fight everything, and fighting everything exhausts you. Power is conserved energy. Every unnecessary reaction drains it. That's why emotionally reactive people feel tired all the time. They are constantly responding, constantly explaining, constantly defending. They live in reaction mode. You don't need their permission to stop doing that. The moment you stop reacting automatically, something uncomfortable happens. Silence. And silence feels dangerous at first, because you've been trained to fill it, to justify yourself, to say something. But silence is not empty. Silence creates space. Space creates clarity. Clarity creates advantage. That's the key. When you don't react, you force the other person to sit with their behavior. When you don't respond immediately, you regain control of timing. When you don't explain yourself emotionally, you protect your authority. It's not about ego. It's about discipline. And discipline always outperforms emotion. You don't need to prove you're right. You don't need to show you're offended. You don't need to demonstrate how much something affected you. You have a choice. Ask yourself this every time you feel the urge to react. Is this response strengthening my position or weakening it? If it weakens it, pause. That pause is power. Over time, those pauses compound. You become harder to read, harder to provoke, harder to manipulate. And that changes everything. Because the person who cannot be easily provoked cannot be easily controlled. That's the truth most people never learn. They spend their lives reacting and wonder why they feel powerless. Power is not taken from them. They give it away, one reaction at a time. Now you understand why reacting costs you power. Next, we need to dismantle one of the biggest lies you were taught. The idea that expressing everything is strength. It isn't. Chapter 3. The illusion that expression is strength. You were taught something that sounds healthy but quietly weakens you. You were taught that expressing everything is strength. Say what you feel. Let it out. Don't hold back. It sounds mature. It sounds honest. It sounds freeing, but it's incomplete. Because unfiltered expression is not strength. It's exposure. That's the key. Expression without discipline does not empower you. It makes you predictable. And predictability is the opposite of power. You have a choice. You can express every emotion the moment it appears. Or you can decide which emotions deserve action. Most people never decide. They react. They confuse authenticity with impulsiveness. They confuse honesty with emotional leakage. They confuse vulnerability with lack of control. And the world rewards that confusion right at first. Attention comes quickly to emotional expression, sympathy, validation, engagement. But respect does not. Respect is built through consistency, through restraint, through emotional stability. That's the key. Look carefully at who is actually respected. It's not the person who shares everything. It's not the person who explains every feeling. It's not the person who reacts emotionally to every situation. It's the person who stays composed. The person who chooses their words. The person who does not feel the need to unload. Expression feels powerful in the moment because it releases tension. But release is temporary. Discipline is permanent. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about governing it. Strong people feel deeply. They just don't broadcast everything they feel. Weak people feel deeply too. They just give it away immediately. You don't need their permission to keep things private. You don't need their permission to stay reserved. You don't need their permission to process internally. But the modern world pressures you to externalize everything. Post it. Share it. Explain it. React publicly. Because once your emotions are external, they are no longer yours. They can be judged, used, manipulated. That's the key. Every time you express emotion without intention, you give the world information about you. What hurts you, what angers you, what excites you too much. And information creates leverage. This is why emotionally expressive people often feel misunderstood, drained, or exposed. They mistake being seen for being respected. Those are not the same. You have a choice. You can seek release, or you can build control. Release feels good now. Control pays later. And later is where life is decided. Expression is easy. Discipline is difficult. Expression is automatic. Discipline is trained. That's why discipline is rare. Most people say everything they feel, then regret it later. Strong people feel everything, then decide what matters. It's not about hiding. It's about timing. There is a time to speak. There is a time to stay silent. There is a time to disengage completely. Emotion does not decide that timing. Discipline does. That's the key. Notice how emotionally expressive people often talk themselves into weaker positions. They over-explain. They justify. They defend. They believe explaining will bring understanding, but explanation often reduces authority. The more you explain emotionally, the more you look affected, and looking affected signals instability. You don't need their permission to be composed. You don't need their permission to say less. You don't need their permission to keep your internal world internal. The strongest people are not the most expressive. They are the most regulated. They don't perform emotions, they process them. They don't vent publicly. They reflect privately. They don't chase understanding. They maintain boundaries. That's the key. Expression without control creates emotional debt. You release something now, but you pay for it later in lost respect, regret, or weakened positioning. Discipline delays expression until it serves you. Ask yourself this before you express anything emotionally. Is this building my position, or just relieving pressure? If it's just relief, pause. That pause is growth. You have a choice. You can let emotion decide your words, or you can let discipline shape them. The modern world tells you to be open at all times. Strong minds know when to close the door. Privacy is not secrecy. Restraint is not fear. Silence is not weakness. They are tools. And tools are only dangerous in the right hands. When you stop expressing everything, something important happens. Your words carry more weight. Your presence feels steadier. People listen differently. Because scarcity creates value, and emotional scarcity creates respect. That's the key. This chapter is not telling you to become cold. It's telling you to become selective. Selective with words. Selective with reactions. Selective with emotional access. Not everyone deserves to know how you feel. Not every moment deserves your response. Not every emotion deserves expression. You don't need their permission to protect your inner world. Master this, and you stop leaking power through your mouth. You stop talking yourself into weakness. And once expression is disciplined, something else becomes obvious. The calm people aren't just respected. They're trusted. And trust is built through stability. Now that you understand why expression is not strength, it's time to examine what actually earns respect in every environment. Calm. Chapter 4. Why calm people are always respected. Respect is not loud. It does not argue. It does not explain itself. Respect is felt, and calm people are always respected first. That's the key. When someone enters a situation without emotional volatility, the entire environment adjusts. Voices lower. Words become measured. Energy shifts. Not because the calm person demanded anything, but because emotional stability signals control. You have a choice. You can be emotionally reactive and constantly misunderstood, or you can be calm and consistently respected. Most people misunderstand respect. They think it comes from dominance, confidence, or charisma. It doesn't. Those things can attract attention, but attention is not respect. Respect comes from reliability. And calm people are reliable. They don't explode under pressure. They don't panic when challenged. They don't emotionally collapse when things go wrong. That predictability creates trust. That's the key. In professional environments, the calm person is given responsibility. In relationships, the calm person becomes the emotional anchor. In conflict, the calm person controls the pace, not because they are passive, but because they are regulated. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need their permission to refuse emotional chaos. But emotionally reactive people feel pressure to perform. They perform outrage. They perform confidence. They perform certainty. And performance is fragile. Calm is not performed. It is embodied. That's the difference. People subconsciously associate calmness with competence because competence requires clarity, and clarity requires emotional control. When someone stays calm, others assume they understand something. That assumption alone creates authority. That's the key. Think about the moments when you felt least respected. You were likely emotional, defensive, reactive, trying to prove something. And the more you tried, the less it worked. Respect moves away from emotional effort. It moves toward emotional restraint. You have a choice. You can try to convince people of your strength, or you can demonstrate it by how little affects you. Calmness sends a message without words. I am not overwhelmed. I am not threatened. I am not unstable. That message is powerful because most people are overwhelmed, threatened, unstable. So when someone isn't, they stand out immediately. That's the key. Calm does not mean silent compliance. It means controlled response. Calm people still say no. They still set boundaries. They still make decisions. But they do it without emotional noise. And noise is what weakens positions. Every emotional spike creates doubt. Every visible frustration creates opportunity for manipulation. Every loss of composure reduces credibility. Calm removes those openings. You don't need their permission to remain composed under criticism. You don't need their permission to pause before answering. You don't need their permission to let silence do the work. Silence paired with calm is one of the strongest signals of authority because it forces others to speak more, reveal more, expose more, while you stay centered. That's the key. People test boundaries emotionally. They provoke. They interrupt. They challenge. Not consciously, instinctively. They are checking for instability. When you stay calm, the test ends quickly because there is nothing to push against. And when there is nothing to push against, respect settles in. Calm people are not respected because they are nice. They are respected because they are unshakable. They don't chase approval. They don't react to disrespect. They don't mirror chaos. They regulate it. You have a choice. You can let other people's emotional states dictate yours, or you can remain internally stable regardless of what's happening. Stability is rare, and rarity creates value. That's the key. This is why leaders train emotional control relentlessly. Not because emotions are bad, but because uncontrolled emotion is dangerous. Dangerous to decisions, dangerous to credibility, dangerous to trust. Calm leaders inspire confidence. Reactive leaders create anxiety, and anxiety never builds loyalty. Respect follows calm the same way fear follows chaos. One repels, the other attracts. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to escalate to be taken seriously. You don't need to emotionally react to assert yourself. Those tactics backfire. Calm amplifies your words. Emotion dilutes them. That's the key. When you speak calmly, people listen longer. When you move calmly, people watch closely. When you decide calmly, people accept outcomes more easily. Because calm communicates certainty, and certainty is comforting. The modern world is overstimulated, overreactive, emotionally loud, so calm becomes disruptive. It cuts through noise. That's why calm people are respected even when they say very little. Their presence does the work. But calm does not happen by accident. It is built. It is trained. It is chosen repeatedly in moments where reaction would be easier. You have a choice. Every time something irritates you, you can let it control you, or you can let it pass. Every time someone challenges you, you can escalate, or you can stay steady. Every time chaos shows up, you can mirror it, or you can regulate it. That's the work. And the reward is simple. People stop testing you. They stop provoking you. They stop doubting you. Because calm has already answered for you. Now that you understand why calm commands respect, we need to address something deeper. Control. Because respect is external. Control is internal. And until you stop letting others set your emotional temperature, calm will remain fragile. Chapter 5. Stop letting other people set your emotional temperature. Most people don't realize this, but their emotional state is not self-generated. It is reactive. They wake up neutral, and within minutes, someone else decides how they feel. A message, a comment, a tone of voice, a look. And just like that, their internal state changes. That's the problem. If other people can change how you feel on demand, you are not in control of yourself. That's the key. Emotional temperature is supposed to be regulated internally, but most people outsource it. They let coworkers decide it. They let partners decide it. They let strangers on the internet decide it. And then they wonder why they feel unstable. You have a choice. You can allow external behavior to dictate your internal state. Or you can take responsibility for regulating yourself. Responsibility is uncomfortable, but it's powerful. Most people don't want responsibility for their emotions. They want justification. He made me angry. She upset me. They disrespected me. No, they acted. You reacted. That distinction matters. Because if someone can make you angry, they can make you careless. If someone can make you anxious, they can make you rushed. If someone can make you insecure, they can make you compliant. That's the key. Emotionally dependent people live at the mercy of other people's behavior. They are calm only when everything goes their way. They are confident only when they are validated. They are focused only when conditions are perfect. That is not strength. That is fragility. You don't need their permission to stay regulated. You don't need their permission to remain calm. You don't need their permission to disengage emotionally. But emotionally dependent people feel entitled to react. They believe reaction proves authenticity. They believe emotional mirroring proves connection. It doesn't. It proves lack of control. You have a choice. Every interaction is an opportunity to practice emotional independence. Someone raises their voice. You lower yours. Someone rushes you. You slow down. Someone tries to provoke you. You observe instead of engage. That's not weakness. That's regulation. That's the key. Regulated people don't absorb energy blindly. They filter it. They decide what enters their system and what stays outside. Most people don't filter. They absorb everything. Drama, stress, negativity, urgency, and then they wonder why they're exhausted. You are tired because you are emotionally overexposed. Too many people have access to your internal state. Strong people close that access. Not aggressively, not emotionally, quietly. They stop reacting automatically. They stop taking everything personally. They stop allowing every interaction to leave a mark. That's the key. This is not about becoming numb. It's about becoming selective. Selective attention, selective reaction, selective emotional investment. Ask yourself this question constantly. Is this worth my emotional energy? Most of the time, the answer is no. And when the answer is no, the discipline is not reacting anyway. You have a choice. Emotional temperature control starts with awareness. The moment you feel a shift inside you, irritation, anxiety, defensiveness, pause. Don't act. Don't speak. Don't explain. Just notice. That pause interrupts the automatic loop. Reaction is automatic. Regulation is intentional. That's the key. When you interrupt the loop enough times, something changes. People lose their ability to affect you easily. Situations lose their emotional charge. Your baseline becomes calmer. And once your baseline is calm, you stop needing others to behave a certain way for you to feel okay. That's emotional independence. And emotional independence is real freedom. Because now your mood is not negotiable. Your focus is not fragile. Your self-respect is not situational. You don't need their permission to feel grounded. You don't need their permission to stay centered. You don't need their permission to choose calm. Most people never build this skill. They outsource regulation their entire lives, and because of that, they are constantly reactive, constantly drained, constantly affected. You don't have to live that way. You have a choice. You can continue letting other people set your emotional temperature, or you can take control of it yourself. One reaction at a time, one pause at a time, one decision at a time. That's the work. And once you stop letting others control your internal state, something powerful becomes possible. Silence, not empty silence. Intentional silence. Because silence is not just absence of words. It is a form of control. And most people don't know how to use it. Chapter 6. Silence is a form of self-control. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. Not because silence is empty, but because silence removes their emotional crutches. Silence takes away their ability to explain, to justify, to perform. And without those, they feel exposed. That's the key. Silence is not the absence of strength. It is the presence of control. Emotionally undisciplined people talk too much. They fill space. They rush to respond. They rush to be understood. Strong people don't rush. They let moments breathe. They let situations reveal themselves. They let other people speak first. You have a choice. You can rush to fill silence with words, or you can use silence to create pressure, because silence creates pressure. When you don't respond immediately, the other person feels it. When you don't explain yourself, the other person starts explaining themselves. When you don't react emotionally, the emotional weight shifts away from you. That's the key. Silence changes the balance of power. Most people think silence makes them look weak, ignored, unimportant. The opposite is usually true. Silence makes people wonder. It makes them adjust. It makes them reconsider. Because silence removes predictability, and predictability is what others rely on to control you. You don't need their permission to stay silent. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to withhold emotional access. But emotionally reactive people feel obligated to respond. They believe not responding is rude. They believe silence escalates tension. They believe words will fix discomfort. Sometimes words make things worse. Silence gives clarity a chance to appear. That's the key. Silence is discipline because it requires restraint. It requires you to tolerate discomfort without releasing it verbally. It requires you to stay centered while others feel uneasy. That discomfort is where growth happens. Most people speak to relieve themselves, not to communicate. They talk to dump emotion, to offload anxiety, to reduce pressure. Silence keeps the pressure inside where it can be processed instead of projected. You have a choice. You can project emotion outward, or you can process it inward. Projection weakens you. Processing strengthens you. That's the key. Think about how often people talk themselves into weaker positions. They over-explain. They justify decisions that don't need justification. They reveal doubt through unnecessary words. Silence prevents that. When you say less, your words gain weight. When you speak selectively, people listen carefully. When you don't rush to fill space, others slow down too. That's control. Silence is especially powerful in moments of provocation. Someone tries to get a reaction. They push. They test. They provoke. And instead of reacting, you pause. That pause disrupts expectations, because provocation only works when it gets a response. If you don't react, the provocation collapses. That's the key. Silence denies emotional fuel, and without fuel, conflict dies quickly. This does not mean you never speak. It means you choose when. Silence is not permanent. It is strategic. Strong people speak when their words matter. Weak people speak when their emotions demand it. You don't need their permission to choose restraint. You don't need their permission to delay a response. You don't need their permission to let silence work for you. The modern world pressures you to respond instantly. Messages, notifications, opinions. Instant response feels productive, but it's reactive. Delayed response feels uncomfortable, but it's controlled. That's the key. Silence gives you time to think, time to regulate, time to decide, and decision is always more powerful than reaction. When you stay silent long enough, you start to notice something. People reveal themselves, they talk more, they explain more, they fill the space you left open, and information flows toward you. Silence turns you into an observer instead of a participant, and observers always have the advantage. You have a choice. You can speak from emotion, or you can observe from discipline. You can rush to clarity, or you can let clarity arrive. Silence is not avoidance, it's patience, and patience always outlasts impulse. Most people fear silence because it removes their ability to control perception. They want to shape the narrative immediately. They want to defend their image. They want to be understood now, but the need to be understood immediately is weakness. Strong people let time do the explaining. That's the key. When you stop filling silence, your presence becomes heavier. People notice when you don't chase attention. They feel it when you don't need validation. They sense it when you're not emotionally leaking. Silence communicates self-sufficiency. And self-sufficiency is intimidating because it can't be manipulated easily. This chapter is not telling you to disappear. It's telling you to stop oversharing control. Silence is not about withdrawal. It's about containment. Containment of emotion. Containment of energy. Containment of authority. When you master silence, you stop giving away information for free. And when information is protected, power consolidates. Now you understand silence. Next, you need to understand something even more important. Silence is useless without discipline, and discipline is not natural. It is trained. Chapter 7. Emotional discipline is trained, not natural. Most people are waiting for emotional control to arrive naturally. It won't. Emotional discipline is not a personality trait. It is not maturity. It is not age. It is training. That's the key. If emotional control were natural, most people would already have it. They don't. Because the natural state of the human mind is reactive, fast, defensive, emotion-driven. Discipline is artificial, and that's why it works. You have a choice. You can keep waiting to feel calmer, or you can train calm the same way you train strength, through repetition, through discomfort, through restraint. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline is intensity, effort, motivation. It's not. Discipline is boring, quiet, repetitive. And because it's boring, most people avoid it. That's the key. Emotionally undisciplined people react first and reflect later. Disciplined people reflect first and respond later. That delay is trained. No one wakes up one day with control. They earn it by practicing pause. Pause before speaking. Pause before responding. Pause before deciding. That pause feels unnatural at first, because your nervous system is used to release. Anger wants expression. Anxiety wants reassurance. Insecurity wants validation. Discipline says no, not forever, just not now. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to slow your response. You don't need their permission to regulate yourself. But your body will resist. Your mind will push back. You will feel the urge to react immediately, to explain, to defend. That urge is not truth. It's conditioning. That's the key. Every emotional reaction you've ever had has trained your nervous system to expect release. So when you don't react, the system panics. It feels wrong, unsafe, uncomfortable, Good. That discomfort means training is happening. Discipline always feels uncomfortable before it feels natural. You have a choice. You can obey the urge to react, or you can sit with discomfort long enough for it to fade, and it will fade. Emotion peaks quickly, then it falls. But if you react at the peak, you lock the pattern in. If you wait, you weaken the pattern. That's the key. Emotional discipline is built in moments no one sees, in the message you don't send, in the argument you don't escalate, in the explanation you withhold. Those moments don't feel productive, but they are. They are rewiring you. Every paused reaction trains your nervous system to tolerate emotion without acting on it, and tolerance creates control. Most people think discipline means suppressing emotion. It doesn't. It means allowing emotion without letting it drive behavior. Strong people don't feel less. They act less on feeling. That distinction changes everything. You don't need their permission to feel anger without expressing it. You don't need their permission to feel hurt without reacting. You don't need their permission to feel anxiety without letting it rush you. Feeling is not the problem. Obedience to feeling is. That's the key. Training emotional discipline requires one simple practice. Delay. Delay your response by seconds, then minutes, then hours. Each delay builds capacity. At first, you delay by 5 seconds, then 10. Then you stop responding immediately altogether. And one day, you realize something has changed. You are no longer controlled by urgency. Urgency is emotional manipulation. Everything urgent wants access to your behavior. Discipline blocks that access. You have a choice. You can let urgency dictate your actions, or you can decide when something deserves your response. Deciding restores power. This training applies everywhere, in conversations, in conflict, in work, in relationships. You stop answering immediately. You stop reacting emotionally. You stop explaining under pressure. And slowly, your baseline changes. You become calmer by default, more deliberate, harder to disturb. That's the key. Most people never train this skill because it doesn't give instant rewards. There are no likes for restraint, no applause for silence, no validation for composure. But the long-term rewards are massive. Clear thinking, better decisions, stronger presence, unshakable self-respect. Emotional discipline compounds. Each controlled moment makes the next easier. Each pause strengthens the system, until one day, what once felt difficult feels automatic. That's when discipline becomes identity. You are no longer trying to be calm. You are calm, and once emotional discipline is trained, provocation loses its power, because now you can feel emotion without becoming it. That's real control. But training discipline is only half the work, because eventually, you will be tested, provoked intentionally, pushed deliberately, challenged directly, and that's where most people break. So next, you need to learn how to stay calm when someone is actively trying to get a reaction out of you. Chapter 8. How to stay calm when you're provoked. Provocation is not accidental. It is intentional pressure. Someone wants a reaction from you, not understanding, not resolution, a reaction. That's the key. Provocation exists for one reason: to pull you out of control, because the moment you react emotionally, you hand the situation over. You have a choice. You can give them what they want, or you can deny them access to you. Most people fail this test. They take provocation personally. They interpret it as disrespect. They feel the urge to correct, confront, or dominate. And that urge is exactly what the provocation is designed to create. If someone can provoke you on demand, they can steer your behavior. That's the key. Staying calm during provocation is not about being passive. It's about refusing to play the game. Provocation is a game of timing and emotion. They push. They wait. They watch. If you react quickly, they know they've hooked you. If you pause, the hook misses. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need their permission to disengage emotionally. But your nervous system will resist. Provocation triggers instinct. Fight, defend, explain. Those instincts are ancient, and they are predictable. That's why provocation works on most people. You have a choice. The moment you feel provoked, do nothing. Not forever, just briefly. That moment of non-action breaks the pattern. Reaction is automatic. Control is intentional. That's the key. Most provocations collapse if they don't receive immediate energy. Silence drains them. Calm neutralizes them. Think about it. A comment that gets no reaction loses power. A challenge that isn't met emotionally feels pointless. A jab that lands on nothing dies instantly. Provocation feeds on emotional friction. Remove the friction, and there is nothing to grip. You don't need to prove strength. You need to demonstrate regulation. Strong people don't rush to defend their image. They let behavior speak. Weak people explain. Strong people observe. That's the key. When someone provokes you, they are revealing something about themselves. Impatience, insecurity, need for control. If you react, you miss that information. If you stay calm, you see clearly. Provocation is a test, not of your confidence, but of your discipline. Anyone can be calm when things are easy. Control is proven under pressure. You have a choice. You can let someone else's behavior dictate your state, or you can stay internally stable regardless of what's happening. That stability frustrates provocateurs because they want movement, they want escalation, they want engagement. Calm denies all three. That's the key. Here is the practical discipline. When provoked, shift your focus inward. Notice your breath. Notice the sensation in your body. Notice the urge to respond. Do not judge it. Do not suppress it. Just observe. Observation creates distance. Distance creates control. And control ends the provocation. Most people think they must respond immediately to maintain respect. They don't. Immediate reaction often looks insecure. Delayed calm response looks confident. You don't need their permission to delay. You don't need their permission to choose timing. You don't need their permission to stay composed. Timing is power. When you respond after you've regulated, your words land differently. They are fewer, clearer, heavier. That's the key. Sometimes the strongest response to provocation is no response, not avoidance, not fear. Selection. You are deciding that this does not deserve your energy. That decision alone reclaims power. Provocation only works when you accept the invitation. You are not required to accept every invitation. You have a choice. As you practice this, you'll notice something important. People provoke less, not because they respect you more consciously, but because they get nothing from trying. Provocation is effort, and humans abandon effort that yields no reward. Calm is unprofitable for manipulators. That's the key. This chapter is not teaching you to tolerate disrespect. It's teaching you to handle it intelligently. Reacting emotionally to disrespect often lowers you to its level. Handling it calmly keeps you above it, and position matters more than emotion. Once you can stay calm under provocation, your internal stability becomes solid. But there is still one challenge left. The world itself is unstable. Noise, chaos, uncertainty. And to truly become hard to disturb, you must learn how to remain internally stable, even when everything around you is unstable. Chapter 9. Becoming internally stable in an unstable world. The world is not going to calm down. That's the first truth you need to accept. Noise will increase. Pressure will increase. Uncertainty will increase. Waiting for stability outside is a losing strategy. That's the key. Most people are emotionally reactive because they expect the world to be predictable. When it isn't, they panic. They look for reassurance. They chase certainty. They try to control what they can't. And the result is constant anxiety. You have a choice. You can depend on external stability, or you can build internal stability. External stability is fragile. Internal stability is durable. Only one of them lasts. That's the key. Internally stable people don't need the world to behave a certain way, to feel okay. They don't need perfect conditions. They don't need clarity from others. They don't need reassurance to move forward. They regulate themselves, and regulation is freedom. Most people tie their emotional state to circumstances. If things are going well, they're calm. If things go wrong, they collapse. That's not resilience. That's conditional stability. Real strength is unconditional. You don't need their permission to stay grounded. You don't need their permission to remain focused. You don't need their permission to choose calm. But chaos will test you. Chaos always tests discipline. That's the key. Internal stability means your baseline does not shift dramatically based on external events. Bad news arrives. You process it. You don't spiral. Conflict happens. You respond deliberately. You don't lose control. Uncertainty shows up. You adapt. You don't freeze. This is not emotional numbness. This is emotional regulation. Strong people feel the same emotions as everyone else. They just don't let those emotions hijack their nervous system. You have a choice. You can let instability outside create instability inside, or you can become a fixed point in a moving environment. Fixed points attract trust. People rely on them, follow them, respect them. Because when everything is uncertain, stability becomes leadership. That's the key. Internally unstable people chase information obsessively. They scroll, they refresh, they seek updates. They believe more information will calm them. It doesn't. It overstimulates them. Internally stable people limit exposure. They choose when to engage. They choose what to ignore. This is not ignorance. It is self-control. You don't need their permission to disconnect. You don't need their permission to step back. You don't need their permission to protect your mental space. Your nervous system is not designed for constant input. Overexposure creates fragility. Discipline creates stability. That's the key. To become internally stable, you must reduce emotional volatility. Volatility is reacting intensely to small changes. Stable people respond proportionally. They don't catastrophize. They don't dramatize. They don't amplify problems emotionally. They see things as they are, not worse than they are. That clarity is powerful. Most chaos feels overwhelming because emotion magnifies it. When emotion is regulated, problems shrink to their actual size. That's the key. Internal stability is built through consistency, consistent routines, consistent standards, consistent responses. When your reactions are predictable to yourself, you feel safe inside your own mind. That safety reduces anxiety, and reduced anxiety increases clarity. You have a choice. You can live reactively, constantly adjusting to whatever happens next, or you can live deliberately, anchored to principles instead of circumstances. Principles don't panic. Principles don't rush. Principles don't collapse under pressure. That's why strong people live by them. Internal stability also means emotional self-trust. You trust yourself to handle discomfort. You trust yourself to wait. You trust yourself to decide calmly. Most people don't trust themselves. That's why they seek external validation constantly. But when you trust your internal regulation, you stop outsourcing reassurance. You become self-contained. That's the key. The world rewards internally stable people over time. They make better decisions. They build stronger relationships. They burn out less. Not because life is easier for them, but because they don't fight reality emotionally. They accept what is, then act intelligently. Acceptance is not weakness. It is clarity. And clarity is the foundation of control. You don't need the world to slow down. You need yourself to stay steady. That's the work. And once you become internally stable, something important changes. Your identity shifts. You stop seeing yourself as someone who reacts to life and start seeing yourself as someone who governs themselves. That shift is permanent, and it leads to the final truth of this audiobook. Being hard to disturb is not a technique. It is who you become. Chapter 10. The Identity of Someone Hard to Disturb. At this point, you need to understand something clearly. Being hard to disturb is not a technique you turn on and off. It is not a trick. It is not a phase. It is an identity. That's the key. Everything you've learned in this audiobook leads here. Emotional control, silence, discipline, calm under pressure, internal stability. These are not behaviors anymore. They are traits. And traits come from identity. Most people live reactively because they see themselves as reactive. They believe emotions happen to them. They believe life controls them. So it does. You have a choice. You can continue seeing yourself as someone who reacts to circumstances, or you can become someone who governs themselves regardless of circumstances. That shift is everything. The moment you adopt the identity of someone hard to disturb, your behavior changes automatically. You stop explaining. You stop reacting. You stop chasing emotional resolution, not because you're trying to, but because it no longer fits who you are. That's the key. Identity shapes behavior more powerfully than motivation ever will. Motivation fades. Identity remains. Emotionally reactive people are constantly managing damage, apologizing, clarifying, recovering from reactions they regret. Hard to disturb people don't need recovery cycles because they don't emotionally leak in the first place. They move cleanly through situations. That's power. You don't need their permission to change who you are. You don't need their permission to stop reacting. You don't need their permission to become emotionally self-contained. But the world will test you. It always does when identity changes. People will push. They will provoke. They will escalate. Not because you are wrong, but because your calm disrupts their expectations. That's the key. When you no longer react the way you used to, people feel the absence. They feel the missing emotional feedback, and some will try harder to get it back. That's not your problem. Hard to disturb people don't explain their evolution. They embody it. Identity does not announce itself. It demonstrates itself consistently. You don't tell people you are calm. They feel it. You don't tell people you are disciplined. They see it. You don't tell people you are unshakable. They experience it when nothing works on you. That's the key. At this level, emotional control is no longer effortful. You still feel emotions, but they pass through you instead of sticking to you. You feel anger without acting on it. You feel anxiety without obeying it. You feel pressure without collapsing under it. That's mastery. Most people spend their lives trying to control outcomes. Hard to disturb people control themselves. And self-control always beats outcome control. Because outcomes are external. You are not. You have a choice. You can let circumstances decide who you are each day. Or you can decide who you are regardless of circumstances. Strong identity removes decision fatigue. You don't ask, should I react? You already know the answer. You don't ask, should I explain myself? You already know the answer. You don't ask, should I engage emotionally? You already know the answer. Because identity has replaced impulse. That's the key. Being hard to disturb means you don't rush, you don't panic, you don't overreact. Not because nothing matters to you, but because you matter more. Your focus matters. Your clarity matters. Your internal state matters. You stop trading long-term stability for short-term emotional release. That trade is what keeps most people stuck. Hard to disturb people don't chase closure. They don't chase validation. They don't chase emotional highs. They build emotional depth instead. Depth creates gravity, and gravity creates influence without effort. That's the key. At this stage, discipline feels natural. Silence feels comfortable. Delay feels normal. Calm feels default. Chaos still exists. Provocation still exists. Noise still exists. But it no longer enters you. It stays outside. That boundary is the identity. You don't need their permission to maintain it. You don't need their approval to protect it. You don't need their understanding to keep it. Hard to disturb people don't need to be understood by everyone. They understand themselves. That's enough. Most people want to feel better. Hard to disturb people want to be better. And being better requires restraint. It requires saying no internally. It requires patience. It requires consistency. But the reward is permanent. No more emotional hangovers. No more regretful reactions. No more losing sleep over things that don't matter. You reclaim your energy, and energy is life. That's the key. This audiobook was never about controlling others. It was about becoming uncontrollable by others. That's real freedom. Not freedom from responsibility. Freedom from emotional slavery. You have a choice. From this point forward, every reaction is optional. Every pause is power. Every moment of restraint strengthens the identity. So here is the final challenge. Do not try to change everything at once. Just commit to this. React less than you want to. Speak less than you can. And observe more than you explain. Do this consistently. Not for a week. Not for a month. Make it who you are. And one day, you'll realize something important. Nothing changed around you, but nothing controls you anymore. You didn't become cold. You didn't become distant. You became hard to disturb, and that is the quiet advantage that separates those who are controlled by life from those who command themselves. If you remember nothing else from this audiobook, remember this. Every time you stay calm when you could have reacted, you win. Every time you pause instead of exploding, you win. Every time you choose discipline over emotional release, you win. The modern world is loud, reactive, and unstable. Your advantage is becoming the opposite. You don't need to announce your strength. You don't need to prove control. You demonstrate it by how little disturbs you. So here is the challenge. For the next 30 days, react less than you want to, speak less than you can, and observe more than you explain. Do that. And you won't just feel stronger. You will become hard to disturb. If this audiobook resonated with you, understand this clearly. Emotional control is only the foundation. Becoming hard to disturb protects you from chaos. But protection alone is not power. The next step is identity. In the next audiobook, we go deeper, not into emotions, but into self-respect, boundaries, and internal authority. Because once you stop reacting, people start testing you. They test your standards. They test your silence. They test your discipline. And if you don't know how to hold your ground calmly, control fades. That's why the next audiobook is titled, The Art of Not Reacting, a Skill That Builds Power. Full audiobook. It teaches you how to Maintain respect without explaining yourself. Set boundaries without guilt or emotion. Stay composed when others push, pressure, or provoke. If you are ready to move from emotional control to personal authority, the next audiobook is waiting. Find it on this channel. Listen carefully. Apply quietly and continue the work.